In this lesson, we are going to see how social conflicts are capable of creating crimes in the society. This has come to be known as conflict theory of criminology. All conflict theories have a common view that the society is held together not by consensus, but by competition and conflict. In the process of conflict, some sections of people, particularly the capitalists, whom Karl Marx called the bourgeoisie, became more powerful. The other group, called proletariat or the working class, whose number is always in surplus, is powerless and depends on the capitalist class for employment and income. This becomes the source of class struggle and many other social evils, including crime. Although the conflict theory is closely associated with Karl Marx, contributions of Max Weber, George Simmel, Louis Kosser, Rolf Degenroff, Wright Mills, etc., also find a place in the theory. In this unit, you will learn what is social conflict in the Marxian sense, how conflict becomes a source of crime and other social evils, what is the modern view of conflict. After having studied this unit, you are expected to have a good understanding of what is meant by conflict and how conflict in the society leads to crimes. How the more powerful classes exploit the less powerful classes, and how the weaker sections of society attempt to wriggle out of exploitation. Now, the term conflict can be taken to mean the struggle between two groups of people with self-interest. Self-interest may often become selfishness. The dividing line between self-interest and selfishness is very thin. Therefore, those with self-interest may appear to be selfish. In the view of Karl Marx, the society has always witnessed the class conflict. Resentment and hostility are considered to be constant elements of society. Marx applied the concept of conflict to the class struggle witnessed by the society at any time. This gave birth to the concepts of historical materialism, which means that the work people are doing is the most important part of social life and that it determines the basic necessities of life like food, clothing and shelter at a minimum level. Marx contended that human labor determines all the values. He was of the view that working men and women are responsible for creating the conditions of their own existence. This implies that the working class needs the highest degree of freedom to achieve their basic necessities of life, but this freedom is hampered by the prevailing socio-economic and political orders. This in turn determines the consciousness of men to the social order. This leads to the question whether the prevailing socio-economic order is right and whether to accept or reject the socio-economic order, which is always dominated by the powerful minority of the community. This in turn leads to the social conflict. Karl Marx was very much influenced by the socio-economic development of the 19th century Europe. He saw the private property as the center of capitalist society and the root cause for all evils. The prevailing socio-economic order at any time creates two diametrically opposite classes, namely the capitalist class called the bourgeoisie and the working class called the proletariat. Invariably, the bourgeoisie constitutes a small minority, while the proletariat constitutes the vast majority of the population. The bourgeoisie capitalist class, in spite of being small in number, is very powerful economically and also politically, while the proletariat working class virtually depends on the bourgeoisie capitalists for their jobs and livelihood. The latter do not have any power under normal circumstances. The capitalist class controls all the means of production in a capitalist system and lives in luxury beyond the imaginations of the common man, the worker, whose only asset is his labor. Marx was of the strong view that the working class is generally paid wages lesser than their work output. For example, if a worker produces goods worth 1000 rupees per day, he would be paid wages less than half his output. In Marx's view, the surplus value constitutes the profits of the employer, and through the profits the employer acquires his socio-economic and political powers. Thus, Marx viewed that the vast majority of the working class is virtually under exploitation by the capitalists. They are underpaid for the work they do. They continue to work, toil and moil to earn their daily bread, while the capitalist bourgeoisie live in an unimaginable luxury. The five-star culture and slum culture exist side by side in many countries today. The working class in particular and the masses in general wait for an opportunity to break this exploitation. The history has witnessed many bloody revolutions like the French Revolution of 1787, in which the people brought down the monarchy and put Louis XIV under the guillotine. There was another revolution of the type of French Revolution in Russia in October 1917, historically known as the October Revolution of Russia. The Marxian philosophy spread through his revolutionary book Das Kapital and the writings of his colleague Lenin, which were greatly responsible for this revolution. Another bloody revolution which brought down the Tsar dynasty, which was notorious for its rule of terror. These two historical revolutions provide a macro level view of the class conflict. They were no doubt of political nature. Even today, some countries are witnessing such class conflicts between the ruler and the ruled, which aim at bringing down the monarchy. Some countries of the Middle East may be cited as examples in this connection. Before we turn to the conflict theory of criminology, it is necessary to understand the types of conflicts. In almost every social function and every organization, it is possible to see the conflict. Some conflicts come to the surface, while some other conflicts remain subdued. However, over a period of time, the subdued conflicts also surface, mostly in violence. Now, let us see the various types of conflicts which lead to crimes. Here, we are deviating from the Marxian ideology of conflict, but we try to see how conflicts lead to crimes. Now, the social conflict. This refers to the conflict between different sections of society, particularly the richer sections and poorer sections, and the so-called socially forward communities and backward communities. In India, the first type of conflict is reflected in the property crimes like dacoity, robbery, burglary and thefts. Poverty and unemployment are generally attributed to such crimes. The second type of conflict is the conflict between the forward communities and backward communities. In many states, this kind of conflict is still going on. It is said that untouchability continues in many villages of Tamil Nadu in spite of the fact that the practice of untouchability has been declared illegal. There have been many instances of communal clashes during the past 50 years. In the northern states, honor killings often find a place in the front page of the media. Quite recently, Tamil Nadu also has witnessed honor killing. This again reflects a social conflicts. Marriages between forward community boys and backward community girls are viewed seriously, and the boy or the girl is done to death by the parental party of the forward community. A Hindu report reads, as on January 1, 2012, Dalit youth victim of honor killing. He was invited by his girlfriend's maternal uncle and done to death. There is thus a never-ending conflict going on between the powerful community and the community without power. Such conflicts most often lead to crimes. Next comes industrial conflicts. Industrial conflict mostly takes the form of industrial unrest. This is often due to the conflict between the employer and the workers over the issues of bonus, wage rates, allowances, compensation policy and other vital issues. However, the industrial unrest does not generally lead to crimes, but may lead to social disorder caused by the workers' agitations, strikes, etc. During the strikes, the workers often turn to violence and damage the properties of the industry concerned. In the case of well-organized industries covered by the industrial acts, the conflicts between the employer and the workers, the government may intervene and try to settle the issues. There is also another dimension of the conflict, that is, the conflict between the rival unions of an industry. Political alignment of the unions is often the cause of the conflict between the unions. This sometimes leads to crimes like murders. Now we come to political crimes. Many countries today are witnessing political conflicts between their political parties. Political rivalry among the political parties often leads to politically motivated crimes. This may include political murders of the party cadres, causing injuries to them and damaging the properties and party establishments. India has been witnessing a number of political crimes in which the conflict between the ruling party and the opposition party became the cause. This situation continues even today. However, political conflicts were out of the purview of Marxian philosophy. Yet, another dimension of political conflict is the assassination of political leaders. There are many historical evidences to prove the political assassinations. Political assassinations are also due to ideological conflict reflected in the policies followed by particular leader or head of the state towards a particular group of people, or it may be due to political rivalry. Assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the former Prime Minister of India, by her own bodyguard due to ideological differences between the people of a particular state and the then government under Mrs. Indira Gandhi as the Prime Minister, is an example for this. Similarly, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated at Sri Perumbudur in Tamil Nadu by the suicide bombers of the LTTE, the revolutionary secessionist force of Sri Lanka, due to the ideological differences between Mr. Rajiv Gandhi and the LTTE Supremo Mr. Prabhakaran. Political conflicts continue to occur from the mildest to the most violent forms even today, and many of them lead to crimes. Currently, India is witnessing the conflict between the government and the violent groups of Naxalites and Maoists. Now we will see the family conflicts. At the micro level, conflicts within the unitary families may arise between the husband and wife, or between the father and the son, or between the brothers or other relations. Family conflicts are almost part of the society. The family conflicts are mostly over the infidelity of wife or husband, over the family property, or over the misbehavior such as excessive drunkenness of the male members of the family. The world as a whole is witnessing increasing divorces and increasing divorce cases filed in the courts. However, India is said to be a country with the lowest number of divorces. Serious family conflicts often lead to crimes like murders. Ideological conflicts arise between certain groups of people who are generally extremists and fundamentalists, with a touch of violent behavior and expression, and who sharply object to and resist the existing social order, particularly the inequality. The Hindu News Report, as on 6/5/2012, reads as rights of the tribals at the core of Maoist conflict. Addressing a press conference here on Saturday, Mr. Sharma, who mediated with the Maoists of Chhattisgarh in getting the collector of Sukma released, said, at the core of the clash between the governments and the Maoists, the question of ownership of Jal, jungle and Zameen of the tribals. They generally target the government and the government officials. The Naxalites and the Maoists are the apt examples in this connection. There are also the groups like the Body and other revolutionary groups of Assam and northeastern region who are demanding separate states. These groups abduct the government officials and demand the release of their arrested men in return for the release of the hostages. Sometimes they go to the extent of killing the hostage. These groups are of the general view that the government and the existing social order are responsible for all the socio-economic ills of the society. A decade ago, Nepal, the neighboring country of India, witnessed a bloody scenario in which the royal family of Nepal, including women and their supporters and children, was mowed down by the Maoist revolutionaries. In order to pull down monarchy and introduce democracy. In some of the countries of Middle East like Syria, people are revolting against centuries old system of monarchy. Democratic forces are on the rise now. The world has been witnessing the conflict between the forces of monarchy and democracy since the dawn of monarchy. Along with Syria, Bahrain is now witnessing a revolt against the ruling Sunni dynasty by Bahrain's Shia majority. At least 50 people have died in the unrest since February 2011 in the longest running street battles of the Arab Spring, as reported by the Hindu as on 22/4/2012. And now we turn to the conflict of religions. This does not mean the religions are in conflict with each other. The followers of religions only are in conflict. Religions which preach hatred and violence have disappeared with the passage of time. It is the fanatics of some religion who preach violence and create a situation of conflict. However, this kind of conflict has given rise to terrorism both at the global level and at the national level. Most countries including India, US, Pakistan, Russia, Britain, France, etc. are facing the terrorist problems. Terrorist attacks, suicide bombing, guerrilla warfare, ambush attack on the soft targets, etc. are the modus operandi of the terrorists. In the aftermath of independence in 1947, India witnessed the bloodiest Hindu-Muslim conflict in which several thousands of people were killed on both sides. Afghanistan is witnessing a prolonged conflict between two groups of people following the same religion. One group wants to enforce their religious tenets very rigidly and fanatically, while the other group wants to enforce the same tenets moderately and allow modern developments. The result of this conflict is killing of people on both sides almost daily by terrorist attacks and suicide bombing and counter-terrorist attacks. This also borders on racial conflict. Now we turn to the racial conflict. This refers to the conflicts between two different races of the same country, each fighting for supremacy over the other. The Afghan situation also aligns with the racial conflict. Often this leads to civil war or war of the factions. The best example is some of the African countries. Prolonged racial discrimination, as what happened in the United States, before the Civil War of 1861 leads to racial conflicts. After the Civil War of 1861, the American blacks were liberated from slavery by President Abraham Lincoln. Racial conflicts are almost a permanent feature of the countries where there are many races, including the immigrants. After the World War II, under the UN resolution, slavery was totally abolished in the world. Colonial rule was predominant in the 19th century with countries like Britain, France, Spain and Portugal, which were having colonies in other continents. Britain was the biggest colonial power, with India, including Pakistan and Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Hong Kong, Malaysia, including the present Singapore and South Africa as their colonies. There was extreme racial discrimination in these colonies in the 19th century. This gave rise to serious racial conflicts, which in turn led to the freedom struggles of countries one by one. The same was true with the erstwhile Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, that is USSR, which had many satellite states like Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Romania and Chechnya. These states started facing conflict with the Allies, which did not like the dominating rule of Russia. The satellite countries began seceding from the Union, and now Russia lost its Union status and it also no more enjoys its military supremacy, which it used to enjoy in the 1960s and 1970s. By December 1991, much to the amazement of the world, the Soviet Union disintegrated into 15 separate countries. Racial conflicts have become almost a permanent feature of many African states like Rwanda, Somalia, Congo, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Niger, Nigeria, Mauritius and Namibia, etc. This not only leads to political instability, but also to uncertainty of life at large. There is no safety for life and property of the people of these states. Looting, robbery, killing, rape and torturing of people of other races all have made life in these African states a mere hell, if at all we could imagine what hell is from the legendary paintings. Often we see in the TV the scenes of people running for life through the dead bodies scattered on the roads. Life in these states is worse than slavery. And in the midst of abject poverty, even the most serious crimes like killing, raping, looting, etc. remain subdued. Criminology has no place in the crime-abound world. These states have moved from crime in the society to a state of crimes of the society. Most of the African states are witnessing never-ending conflicts, but the crimes witnessed in this regard are mostly state-supported crimes. A very recent racial conflict witnessed by the world is that of Sri Lanka, wherein the people of Tamil origin came into conflict with their Sinhalese counterparts. The conflict took the shape of certain organizations like the Liberation of Tigers of Tamil Eelam, Tamil Eelam Liberation Organization, etc. The LTTE waged an almost 2 decades old war against the state, but ultimately it was overcome by the Sri Lankan government. Generally, in such racial conflicts, crimes committed by the government do not surface. In India, the Godhra train burning in 1992 is an apt example for racial conflict, but this was a communal conflict between the people of two religions. In spite of all the developments of the modern period and all the socio-economic changes, now and then racial conflicts and communal conflicts erupt, resulting in the massacre of too many people at a time. So far, we have seen different types of conflicts witnessed by the community. Conflicts of these types are never ending, and crimes also are never ending. The Marxian concept of conflict is narrow in its connotation and is confined to the class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeois classes. Although Karl Marx did not directly relate his theory to class struggle to crimes, some of his followers did it. Among them, notable were Max Weber, Bonger, Rush, and Krishimer, Gordon, Cambliss, and Riemann. Max Weber model of society and its implications for criminal behavior is pluralistic and pessimistic. Weber's approach is pessimistic in the sense that capitalism is considered to be the source of conflict in the society. Following Weber, Collins, a sociologist, contends that conflict is inherent in the competition for scarce resources. On the footsteps of Weber, we also find the theory of lawmaking. Black's contention is that penal law will be used more severely against people of low culture than against people of high culture. Hagen offered an explanation for juvenile delinquency in terms of strict parental control, which again signifies conflict. Simmel is of the view that there are always group conflicts owing to envies, wants, and desires. This view finds support in Wald's group conflict theory, which consists of the idea that continually competing groups come into conflict with one another, and those that oppose the interests of the dominant group are more likely to violate the law. To Wald, the society is always in disequilibrium, with some sections, especially those with less power and less comfort, remaining in uneasy and uncomfortable positions. Cambliss formulated a theory of lawmaking, law breaking, and law enforcement, and is of the view that law expands as class differences widen. He is of the view that both crime and crime control divert attention from real economic problems. Now we shall have a critical review of the conflict theory. Although Karl Marx had a great influence on the prevailing socio-economic situation of his times through his revolutionary book Das Kapital, he never thought that his theory of conflict would find a place in the modern criminology. Nor does his concept of class struggle was associated with crimes. It only led to Socialist Revolution of October 1917, historically known as the Bolshevik Revolution. Some criminologists like Messenger and Rosenfeld have argued against the assumptions of Marx that conflicts of the capitalist society always lead to crime and violence. The conflict theory faces a number of criticisms. Conflict alone is not the cause for all crimes. Without any symptom of conflict, many white-collar crimes are committed by well-to-do or well-placed people. Conflict need not always lead to crime. It may lead to smooth changes amicable to both sides. Conflict may bring about social changes, which may submerge the old conflicts but may lead to new types of conflicts. Capitalism has not become extinct due to class struggle and conflict as predicted by Marx. Capitalism, in spite of all its drawbacks, is becoming stronger than communism. However, the Russian communism and Chinese communism became weaker during the 1990s due to the rising capitalism and globalization. Both the countries now have moderated their communist policies. The modern socio-economic system is one of the increasing dependence in spite of the conflicts, and conflict theory ignores other peaceful ways of settlements between the two sides. The conflict theory mainly focuses on the economic factors and ignores the social, political, and religious factors, which are also sources of conflict in the modern era. Marx's theory of class struggle is based on a two-class system, namely the working class and the capitalist class, and ignored the presence of other classes and subjects.